Welcome to WhiskyCast, cask strength conversation featuring news and interviews from the world of whiskey. I'm Mark Gillespie, and this is episode number 1115 for June 29th, 2025. Coming up in a few minutes.
Why can't bourbon have fun, immersive, colorful packaging like craft beer and wine and tequila and rum, and still have ultra-premium, award-winning quality liquid inside the bottle? So I knew we wanted to do that. And once we settled on this idea of Filmland, we said, well, what canvas is going to give us the most room to do that? And B movies just kind of jumped into our heads. Like, if we do B movies, we can be as fun and outrageous and silly as we want to be with the labels and still be super serious inside with the liquid.
Filmland Spirits takes an unusual path to creating its whiskeys by developing a B-movie plotline and origin story for each one. With names like Moonlight Mayhem and Ryes of the Robots and eye-catching movie poster-themed labels, the goal is to make the outside of the bottle as interesting as the whiskey inside. I'll talk with co-founder Troy Bolotnick later on WhiskyCast In-Depth, and we'll taste a couple of his whiskeys in the What I'm Tasting This Week department. We'll also have Behind the Label and much more. The news is next on this week's WhiskyCast. Crafted with time, shaped by nature, perfected by generations. From Yamazaki to Hibiki to Hakushu, every drop of House of Suntory whiskey is a reflection of where it comes from. House of Suntory, this is Japanese whiskey.
Enjoy responsibly. Suntory Whiskey Single Malt and Blended Japanese Whiskey. 43% alcohol by volume. Copyright 2025 Suntory Global Spirits Import Company, Chicago, Illinois.
Hello, Gabriel Cardarella for Jewers. The 2025 release of our Jewers 19-Year-Old Champions Edition is a masterpiece, crafted for those who appreciate the finer things, whether on the course or in a glass. More on that in a moment.
Let's get started with the week's news, and there is more trouble to report in Ireland. Diageo has halted production indefinitely at its Roe & Co. distillery in Dublin and plans to find new roles for the 5 production workers affected by the move. A company spokesperson said the Roe Visitor Center will remain open and the brand will still be available using existing stocks of whiskey. Diageo opened the distillery in 2017 in the old power station at the Guinness St. James's Gate complex in the Dublin Liberties. In addition, the Powerscourt distillery near Dublin in County Wicklow has gone into receivership, with production halted at the distillery on the Powerscourt estate. According to a statement on the distillery's website, Powerscourt will remain open to visitors and all orders will be honored. One other distillery closing to note this week, Pennsylvania's Manatawny Stillworks is shutting its doors today for the final time. In an email, the company's owners said, quote, "After years of navigating stiff competition, shifting attitudes and trends in consumption, and difficult economic conditions, it's time for us to hang up the barrel thief and close the doors." The distillery opened in Pottstown, Pennsylvania in 2014. Irish Enterprise Minister Peter Burke is optimistic that EU trade officials will reach a deal with the Trump administration before new tariffs take effect on July 9th. President Donald Trump has threatened to impose 50% import tariffs on Irish whiskey and other European goods unless a free trade agreement is reached. One sticking point is Ireland's plan to require health warning labels on alcoholic beverages, which Washington sees as a barrier to free trade. Burke has asked Ireland's health minister to hold off on introducing the warning labels because of the trade impact. The U.S. is the largest single market for Irish whiskey sales worldwide. Whiskey made up the bulk of the €860 million worth of drink exports to the U.S. last year. Those exports are currently being hit with a 10% tariff. A federal bankruptcy judge has allowed Stole Group to move forward with its Chapter 11 restructuring plan. The U.S. unit of Stole Group filed for Chapter 11 back in February, citing market headwinds and the impact of a massive cyber attack. That plan includes the Kentucky Owl Bourbon brand, which can now release a new batch of bourbon dedicated to retired master blender John Ray as it moves to clear its inventory of maturing barrels of whiskey. Ardbeg will soon be looking for a new distillery manager. Colin Gordon is stepping down after 5 years on the job. He took over for Mickey Heads when Mickey retired in 2020 and led the distillery through its largest expansion project on record. According to the Iliac, Colin will be taking on a new role in the Scotch whisky industry that does not involve distilling. We'll keep you posted when his new role is announced. Other departures of note, Brendan Coyle is leaving Utah's High West Distillery as master distiller after nearly 20 years. He and his wife are opening a cidery. And Jackie Zykan is leaving behind the Hidden Barn brand that she created with the folks at the Neely Family Distillery in Kentucky. She's starting an agricultural business that will supply the Neely family with herbs for their absinthe. New whiskies of note this week. Freddie Noe of the James B. Beam Distilling Company is out with the 9th chapter in his Little Book series of whiskies. This year's release, None for Granted, takes bourbons and ryes aged between 7 and 11 years and blends them together. It's available now with a recommended retail price of $160 a bottle. Heaven Hill has released the second edition of its grain-to-glass rye whiskey. This follows the release of the grain-to-glass bourbon several weeks ago and uses grain grown on the Peterson family's farm near Loretto, Kentucky. It's priced at $100 a bottle. Michter's has 2 releases to mention this week. Its annual releases of Schenk's Homestead and Bomberger's Declaration. The Schenk's is a high rye American whiskey matured in toasted, but not charred, French oak barrels, while the Bomberger's is a classic bourbon partially matured in Chinkopin oak barrels. The Schenk's is priced at $110 a bottle, while the Bomberger's is priced at $120. Barrel Craft Spirits is releasing batch number 37 of Barrel Bourbon. This whiskey blends bourbons distilled in Kentucky, Indiana, and Tennessee, ranging from 8 to 15 years old. It's available with a recommended retail price of $85 a bottle. The Taub family's Jacob's Pardon whiskey brand has released a new cask collective bottling. The whiskey is a 16-year-old corn whiskey finished in rare 50-year-old Oloroso sherry casks, sourced from the Williams & Humbert Bodega in Spain. It's available at select retailers for $124.99 a bottle. I received a sample this week. I'll have tasting notes for it soon at WhiskyCast.com. From England now, Spirit of Yorkshire Distillery has released a special single-cask bottling to support the UK's independent retailers. It's from a refill Oloroso sherry hogshead that was matured for 7 years before being bottled at cask strength. It's available from select independent retailers in the UK for £120 a bottle. Northern Ireland's Two Stacks Whiskey has released its single-grain double-barrel Irish whiskey in the U.S. now. The whiskey is first matured in ex-bourbon barrels for 3 to 5 years, then spent more than a year in Oloroso sherry casks before bottling. It's available in 700 ml bottles for $44.99 a bottle, and in the Two Stacks Dram-in-a-Can format for $6.99 a can. Douglas Lang & Company is out with a new edition of its Rock Island Blended Malt, which blends whiskeys from Arran, Orkney, Jura, and Islay. The 16-year-old limited edition is matured in sherry casks and is an offshoot of the 14-year-old Rock Island released 2 years ago. It'll carry a recommended retail price of £75 a bottle. And finally, congratulations to the folks at Scotland's Ardgowan Distillery. They filled their first casks of whiskey the other day after 8 years of planning and construction work. It's the first new distillery to open in the Inverclyde area for more than a century. The Visitors Center will open later this summer. You can keep up with the latest whiskey news all week long at WhiskyCast.com and in the WhiskyCast community app. The news is brought to you by the Dalmore.
Hello, Richard Patterson here, Master Distiller, Master Blender for the Dalmore. You know, whenever the team and I are in the world sharing our exceptional single malt, we like to keep in touch with Mark Gillespie and the latest news from WhiskyCast.
Let's open up the calendar now and see what's happening around the world of whiskey. The Whisky Show is this coming Saturday in Melbourne, Australia. Belfast Whiskey Week runs from the 18th of July through the 26th at various venues around Belfast. Tales of the Cocktail takes over New Orleans from the 20th through the 25th. Whisky Live Sydney is on the 25th, along with the Top Shelf Whisky Festival in Canberra, Australia, followed the next day by the Whisky Show in Canberra. If you're organizing a whiskey event, let us know about it. We'll add it to the calendars at whiskycast.com and in the WhiskyCast community app. Japanese whiskey began with Shinjiro Tori's vision to reflect the true nature and spirit of Japan. The House of Suntory was founded on these principles, guided by generations of craftsmanship that have transformed time, nature, and precision into something greater than the sum of its parts. Pure waters from the mountains of Hakushu, Mizunara oak shaped by decades of patience, a blending philosophy rooted in harmony. These aren't just techniques, they're a way of thinking, a quiet pursuit of balance and depth. From the layered complexity of Yamazaki to the crisp vibrancy of Hakushu and the elegant artistry of Hibiki, every whiskey is a reflection of where it comes from and the hands that shape it. House of Suntory. This is Japanese whiskey.
Enjoy responsibly. Suntory Whiskey Single Malt and Blended Japanese Whiskey. 43% alcohol by volume. Copyright 2025 Suntory Global Spirits Import Company, Chicago, Illinois.
This week on WhiskyCast, we're going to the movie theater. Those Saturday afternoon classic B-movies inspired Troy Bolotnick and Charlie Flint to create Filmland Spirits, a whiskey brand with a Hollywood focus. The labels are designed like old-style movie posters from the 50s, 60s, and 70s, with names like Moonlight Mayhem, while the liquid inside the bottles stands up to the critics. Troy Bolotnick joined me the other day on a Zoom call. Give me the Filmland Spirits origin story.
Oh, sure. Absolutely. Basically, one of my partners and I, Charlie, have been friends for 30 years. And he moved to Atlanta a bunch of years ago, and we started getting into bourbon. And now this is maybe 15 years ago or more. We started getting into bourbon kind of separately and together, and started meeting in Kentucky at least once a year. And we would go to like 5 distilleries a day for 4 days in a row, like crazy people. It was a little easier back then because you didn't need appointments. You could just show up because it wasn't like it is now. And we just fell in love with all of it, right? We fell in love with the whiskey and the culture and the cocktails and the people, and just said one day we want to do our own brand. And flash forward a bunch of years later, I kind of worked on it on and off behind the scenes. And then a bunch of years later, I was sitting with another friend of mine who actually was a podcast host. And he'd been helping me try and get this off the ground and come up with ideas. And we're banging our heads against the wall. And he started interviewing me as if we were on a podcast. And I started talking about the movies and writing and my passion as a writer. And he said, stop, because the way you're talking about writing is the way you talk about whiskey. Find a way to do it together. And so Filmland Spirits was kind of born out of that.
How so?
In the sense that we said, okay, well, how can we combine film and whiskey together, particularly in a way that is not about other films, but gives us this giant playground to explore and to grow as a brand. And we knew, by the way, that we wanted our labels to be bright and eye-catching and really stand out, because as a bourbon nerd myself, I would spend too many hours in the aisles at the various liquor stores going, why is all the packaging brown and beige and pictures of dogs or birds or, old guys, from colonial eras? Why can't bourbon have fun, immersive, colorful packaging like craft beer and wine and tequila and rum, and still have ultra premium award-winning quality liquid inside the bottle? So I knew we wanted to do that. And once we settled on this idea of Filmland, we said, well, what canvas is going to give us the most room to do that? And B movies just kind of jumped into our heads. Like, if we do B movies, we can be as fun and outrageous and silly as we want to be with the labels and still be super serious inside with the liquid. And then Rise of the Robots came right out of my head after that.
Rise of the Robots was your first whiskey, right?
It was our first concept. It was one of the first 2 we launched. We launched Moonlight Mayhem Bourbon and Rise of the Robots Rye. And Moonlight Mayhem Extended Cut, which is our cast strength bourbon, in September of 2022 in California and Kentucky.
How did you come up with the names for those two and the stories behind them?
Sure. So, like I said, like literally in that same session where it came up with Filmland, I started thinking about the rhythm that B movie titles have. Attack of the Killer Tomatoes, right? That kind of, Attack of the Killer Clowns or something like that, da-da-da-da-da-da rhythm. And, excuse me, Rise of the Robot Bartenders came out of my mouth. And until very late in the process, the title was Rise of the Robot Bartenders. It's only because we couldn't fit the word bartenders on the label that it got cut. Right? So it just became Rise of the Robots. But once I had that title, I think I woke up the next morning and I just wrote like a 3-page treatment for what the movie would be. And I had this idea of, I used to be in a technology business and I was so fed up with technology that I created a story where it's a future where technology has been outlawed and a fallen technology titan builds an army of robotic bartenders to take over the world. And our heroine, Courtney, who's on our label, is a bartender who has to turn into an action hero and save the world. And so it was this whole thing that came into my mind about robot bartender. And I'm trying to be over the top on purpose, right? Like I know that I'm doing that because that's what the spirit of the stories are, right? I'm trying to appeal to Marvel nerds and Star Wars geeks like me who love to immerse themselves in the story of their products and share it with all of their friends.
Where did the story for Moonlight Mayhem come from? It's the new edition, the second one, the White Port Wolf.
So White Port Wolf is our first finished bourbon, right? We took our Moonlight Mayhem double gold medal winning bourbon. We aged it for 7 years, and then we finished it in White Port wine casks that we got from Napa Valley, actually. And so Moonlight Mayhem ends with our heroes, Tommy and Sylvain, escaping the pack on Hollywood Boulevard and her brother and fleeing. So Moonlight Mayhem 2 picks up where they have hid out in a disused vineyard in Napa Valley, and they encounter the legendary, mythical, fierce White Port Wolf. And then from there, go through a process of figuring out, they battle her until the pack shows up to take Sylvain back to Hollywood and kill Tommy, and they have to side with the White Port Wolf, and it goes from there.
These would make great movies.
Thank you. I appreciate that. We make trailers for all of our products. So we put them on YouTube, but they're on our website as well. So we make trailers, interactive storyboards. We put up script pages. And of course, you can download the movie poster. But we try and add as much content around the movies as we can, because I've had a lot of customers say this to us. And this is something I used to say internally, but people say to us, we're sort of like the adult cereal box, right? So when you were a kid, you sat and ate your morning cereal and read the back of the cereal box. Now you're sitting and sipping on this gold medal winning bourbon and rye while you're immersing yourself in the story, because our bottles have the characters and their bios and the synopsis of the movie, and all of that is right on the label.
And the labels are set up like movie posters.
Yeah, the front of the label is definitely intended to be a movie poster. All our legal and descriptive information about the product is at the bottom layer, like old-fashioned movie posters always have the credits at the bottom. We have a credit block on the side of the label that includes more information. We try and be as transparent as possible. So if we can say, we always, of course, say where it's distilled and where it's bottled, but if we're allowed to share the mash bill, the char of the barrel, whatever we're allowed to share, we put right on the label.
Are you having trouble sourcing whiskeys?
Not at all. And knock on wood, we have not, and we've been buying whiskey since long before we were on the market. But we had some relationships that we formed long before we launched. Because when I was thinking, and I don't really usually talk about this, but when I was thinking about starting the company years ago and knew nothing about the business, I started calling certain companies and saying, hey, if I were to have a brand and I wanted to buy whiskey from you, what would I do? And met a lot of nice people who were very nice about teaching me. And so by the time it came time to buy, I called them back and I said, I've been calling you every year and asking you questions. Well, now I'd like to buy $500,000 of barrels from you. And, it worked out. So I've developed a lot of relationships, and we also have some very strategic relationships that are, I guess you would call a competitive advantage for us, with some sources of whiskey that get us some things that a lot of other brands our size wouldn't have access to.
And you're not going to name names.
I can't. I would lose that competitive advantage if I did.
Tell me about Quadriforce.
Sure. I'm super proud of Quadriforce for a lot of different reasons. Primarily the way it tastes. Also because we just won a gold medal for it this past spring at San Francisco. But Quadriforce is super unique. When I meet consumers, like I was at Liquor Barn in Kentucky a week or so ago doing tastings, and I say to them, look, this is a bourbon that no one has ever made before and no one will ever make again. Nobody has taken these 4 bourbons and combined them in this way, and nobody ever will again. So you're about to taste something 100% unique. Because what we did is we took 4 bourbons, originally distilled in 4 different states, and blended them together in a particular ratio. And then we took that single liquid that we made and put it into bottles with 4 different labels. So each one of the labels features one of the 4 Quadriforce heroes, and each one of the heroes represents one of the states of distillation. So Kentucky Anna for the Louisville edition, Tennessee Terra for the Nashville edition, Cali Comet for the LA edition, and then Mr. Misteron for the mystery state of distillation. And we did that on purpose because sometimes we're not allowed to even say, and with a blended bourbon, you don't have to say where things are distilled, but sometimes we have very strict rules on we can't say where we got a particular bourbon and things like that. And we thought we would have fun with it and play into it. So we made everything about that 4th character a mystery, his secret identity, his powers keep changing them. And of course, we don't know his name and we don't know where the source for his portion of the blend comes from. But we ended up making something that we're really proud of from a flavor and mouthfeel and taste perspective. And we're really gratified to get that medal a few months back.
How's the business side of things going?
Business is really good. I mean, I know there's a lot of pressure in the industry. There's a lot of downward pressure on pricing, and we hear all these things about certain distributors pulling out of markets and things like that. So far for us, it's thankfully been okay. I mean, coming into 2025, we were distributed in 10 states in one form or another. We now just entered our 16th state, and we have plans for at least 2 or 3 more this year, depending on, of course, timing of everything. So that's been going really well, and we have a lot of states just coming to us because they see us, they hear about us, and you know, we catch people's attention. And then when they start finding out we're not just a pretty face in terms of our labels, and that we have this meaningful, high quality, well-regarded, well-reviewed liquid inside, you know, it makes sort of that perfect combination for what distributors and retailers and consumers are looking for.
I was looking at your website, and there's a great big invest banner at the top right now. I take it you're looking to raise some capital.
I always joke with people from 5 years before I ever started this, 50% of my job is raising money. And it will always be my job because there's never enough funds for any small business, right? And especially a business like this that takes a lot of capital to gain market share. And I'm not, we're not going out there looking to compete with any of the brands that start with the letter J, right? We're competing with the craft brands that are out there. But it still takes a tremendous amount of marketing dollars to break through. So we know we will have to keep investing to get to the levels that we want to get to. And that's all, built in and baked into our plan. So I will always be raising money. And when we closed our last round, which was really successful, and we did it all through, private high net worth individuals and things like that, we get a lot of requests from our community, our customers and fans that say, I'd love to be part of this somehow. But in those other rounds, we can't take small chunks. We can't take $250. It's just not built that way, and it would be unruly. So we looked at crowdfunding and we said, well, if we do that, we can continue to raise from high net worth individuals and other possibilities. And we can give all of our followers who are interested in becoming quote unquote owners, which literally they are, if they invest. It kind of was the best of both worlds and, killed 2 birds with 1 stone sort of thing. And we decided to give it a shot.
Give me a sense of the one character that didn't work, that you said, no, we're not going to do this one.
Oh, okay. I thought you meant one that didn't work that we actually did. Let's see. I'm going to be careful what I say here. There was a certain type of monster that we were going to do before we decided to do werewolves. And we're actually fairly far down the road with that type of monster, and we had to pivot because of trademarks. So, other than that, I'm trying. What you're basically asking is, what did we leave on the cutting room floor? To put it in film terms, I don't think we've officially left anything. I mean, I guess there was a concept. I get voted down, right? I'll come up with these ideas and I'll bring them to my team as fleshed out as I am at that point. And I will get voted down, and sometimes I listen and sometimes I don't. There was definitely some dinosaurs from outer space that have got voted down. I'm not saying they won't come back, but definitely mega raptors from Mars was an idea that my team wouldn't let me do.
Mega raptors from Mars.
Yes.
What was the backstory on that one, or did you get
I hadn't fully fleshed it out yet, but it definitely involved alien dinosaurs. I did do mock-ups of what the label would look like, because that's how I start. Is I start with sometimes just a title, sometimes a story idea, and then I will go into Photoshop and mock up the poster, and I will end up doing like 30 versions of it before I bring maybe 10 of them to my team, and then we rip them apart and get feedback, and then I go back and forth until we, from a sales, marketing, and creative standpoint, we get to something that we're all pretty happy with. And then we'll hire an artist to come in and re-illustrate the entire thing from scratch.
These posters are really works of art in their own.
Yeah. And in fact, all of the artists who've worked for us until the newest release, Moonlight Mayhem, White Port, they all illustrate by hand, but they do it on a computer, right? So they're using all the benefits and the techniques, and they're all, on the younger side. We connected with an artist recently that we used for Moonlight Mayhem 2, White Port Wolf, who was doing movie posters in the 80s and 90s. So he's an older gentleman, and he is brilliantly creative. And we met him, and he happens to live very close to my marketing manager up in Oregon. And we said, let's give this a shot. I think he can really do this. And he just knocked it out of the park. But the thing that's really cool, he did the entire thing on canvas. There was no computer involved until it got scanned in at the end.
Wow.
So we have, and now I have them in the other room, his hand-painted boards with the main character, the background, the car, the other characters, the moon, all of it hand-painted on canvas. And it's just so cool. So he's actually working on the label for a future product for us as well in the same way.
What's next?
Well, I shouldn't have said that because I know I can't tell you. But we're working on something again. So we have the strategy of our core products: Moonlight Mayhem Extended Cut, Ryes of the Robots Extended Cut, right? A 94 proof rye and bourbon and a cast strength rye and bourbon. That's our core offering, always available. Then we do these limited releases, and depending on the liquid and other business factors, that we do different amounts of. And we're trying to do 1 to 2 limited releases a year, like a spring and a fall kind of thing. So last year, Quadriforce was our fall release. This year, Moonlight Mayhem 2 is our spring release. We have a fall release that we are working on. If it comes out in the fall, I'm not 100% sure. It probably will, but I would get killed by my marketing team and my PR team if I talked about it specifically. So you'll have to stay tuned, but I know we'll get you something in mid-August.
You'll find a link to the Filmland Spirits website in the show notes for this episode at whiskycast.com. And thanks to Troy Bolotnick for joining us this week on WhiskyCast In-Depth. Let's start off the What I'm Tasting This Week department with the Filmland Spirits Moonlight Mayhem 2, the White Port Wolf. As Troy told us, it's a bourbon finished in white port casks and bottled at 47% ABV. The nose has touches of green grapes, dried flowers, dried grass, honey, and vanilla. The taste has a nice touch of port wine, along with white pepper spiciness, dried fruits, honey, and vanilla. The finish, long and dry with a hint of white wine. I'm scoring Moonlight Mayhem 2, the White Port Wolf from Filmland Spirits, a 91. Let's continue the double feature with Quadriforce, the blend of 4 bourbons from 4 different states. Once again, it's bottled at 47% ABV. The nose has black cherries, red apples, honey, and brown sugar. The taste is spicy with black pepper, allspice, and a hint of clove, along with black cherries and a hint of anise. The finish, long and fruity with a hint of anise. I'm scoring the Filmland Spirits Quadriforce Bourbon a 92. And speaking of 4s, Minden Mill's first bourbon release is a 4-grain Nevada bourbon, also coincidentally bottled at 47% ABV. The nose has touches of cherries, vanilla beans, honey, and subtle spices. The taste has notes of cherry cola, vanilla, allspice, and black pepper, while the finish is long and well-balanced with touches of spice. I'm scoring the Minden Mill Nevada Straight Bourbon a 92. I'll be adding these whiskeys to our searchable list of nearly 3,900 different whiskeys from all over the world. Check it out this week at WhiskyCast.com.
Dewar's 19-Year-Old Champions Edition is more than just exceptional whiskey. It's a tribute to the U.S. Open Championship. Each year's limited edition release is crafted to honor the host course, integrating its spirit through a unique cask finish. For the 2025 tournament at Oakmont in Pennsylvania, Dewar's continues this tradition with an exceptional 19-year-old whiskey, double-aged, and finished in a way that nods to Pennsylvania's long-standing connection to apple brandy. Created by 6-time Master Blender of the Year Stephanie McLeod, this year's edition is finished in Calvados apple brandy casks, imparting layers of green apples, apricots, citrus, warm spice, and a touch of honey. This isn't just a tribute, it's a masterclass in blending. Seek it out, savor every drop, and trust me, you'll be glad you did. Please enjoy responsibly. Copyright 2025, Dewar's is a trademark. Imported by John Dewar & Sons Company, Coral Gables, Florida. Blended Scotch whiskey, 43% alcohol by volume.
Let's open up the inbox now and see what people are talking about this week in our community segment. With the heat wave that hit the East Coast this week, I decided to ask one simple question in the WhiskyCast community app. It's 100 degrees outside. Too hot to drink whiskey? The responses came fast and furious. Tom, the Tracer Bullet, responded, "Silly, Mark, it's not that hot in the house." Hugo Dart posted this from Brazil. "Well, I couldn't possibly think that and live in Rio de Janeiro. If you ask me, any old shade makes it cool enough." And Alan Chanel added in, "Not if you have a whiskey that stands up well to ice. For me, Maker's Mark and Johnny Walker Green and Black Label are great examples." But the winning response comes from Pete at Whiskey Ranked. No, wait. Is this one of those tell me you've been kidnapped without telling me you've been kidnapped things? No, I'm sorry. Really hot weather calls for a cold beer at times, in my opinion. Lots of people shared photos from their tastings and bottle finds this week. If you'd like to see what's happening in the community, download the free WhiskyCast community app from your app store and join the conversation. You can also find us on social media. Look for WhiskyCast on X, Blue Sky, Threads, Instagram, and Facebook. Our email address is comments@whiskycast.com. Let's close out the show now with Behind the Label, our look at the history, science, and people who make whiskey unique. Ever wonder what causes the touch of roasted nuts or toasty character that you find in some whiskeys? While some of that character comes from the wood, it's often created by what's known as the Maillard reaction. It's a chemical reaction caused when heat interacts with sugars and amino acids during distillation. But it can also happen when barley is being dried using heat and during the mashing process, and it creates an array of flavor and aroma compounds. Now, I said it can come from the wood, and the Maillard reaction can also happen as barrels are being charred, as the heat from the flame reacts with the wood's own sugars and amino acids to create flavor compounds as the sugars caramelize. If there's something you'd like us to look at on an upcoming episode, just get in touch with us. That's all for this episode of WhiskyCast. You'll find links for the stories in this episode in our show notes at whiskycast.com. That's also where you'll find the latest whiskey news, my tasting notes, the calendar of events, and a complete archive of past episodes that goes all the way back to 2005. Get in touch with us, download the free WhiskyCast community app from your app store, or find us on social media. We're on Blue Sky, X, Threads, Instagram, and Facebook at WhiskyCast, and our email address is comments@whiskycast.com.
Discover the 2025 limited release of Dewar's 19-Year-Old Champions Edition, finished in Calvados apple brandy casks, a perfect fusion of craftsmanship and tradition. Here's to great whiskey and the game that inspires it.
Crafted with time, shaped by nature, perfected by generations. From Yamazaki to Hibiki to Hakushu, every drop of House of Suntory whiskey is a reflection of where it comes from. House of Suntory. This is Japanese whiskey.
Enjoy responsibly. Suntory Whiskey Single Malt and Blended Japanese Whiskey. 43% alcohol by volume. Copyright 2025 Suntory Global Spirits Import Company, Chicago, Illinois.
WhiskyCast is a production of Cask Strength Media, copyright 2025, and comes to you from the charming, yet regrettably dry town of Haddonfield, New Jersey. I'm Mark Gillespie, reminding you that when you drink, please drink responsibly. Thanks for listening.